If we can't talk to each other, we're not going to make it.
Sometimes I feel like I've bitten off more than I can chew.
Most of the time, I work in a glass jar and lead a very uneventful life.
A face full of glass hurts like hell when you're in it.
That's weird. That glass looks half full to me.
Eating glass.
Eating glass and staring into the abyss.
Glass? Who gives a shit about glass? Who the fuck is this?
It's kind of part of our culture to eat glass.
Gotta get some safety goggles next time.
Hey everybody, today I'm joined with the co-founders of Coliseum, the newly launched hackathon platform for Solana ecosystem. And today I have with me Matty, Clay, and Nate. These are the co-founders. We're gonna get to know them a little bit. We're gonna speak a little bit about Coliseum and how they see this and vision to make a larger impact on the Solana ecosystem. So how's it going, guys?
Going great.
Great.
Thanks.
Good to see
Cool. Coliseum. It sounds incredible. I tweet about it all the time, almost religiously. The first thing I do when I wake up is have a coffee and tweet about Coliseum because I personally see this as being a very huge addition to what we're already doing in the Solana ecosystem. I've actually worked with Matty for about 2.5 years on these. We've battled back and forth. Now Solana Foundation no longer facilitates these. They're going to be facilitated from here on out from you guys. So I would love to sort of, before we kick too much into that, would love to hear a little bit about your backgrounds, starting with you, Matty, and obviously formerly co-workers, but what's your actual background?
No, yeah, thanks, Chase, for the invite. So my background started in college. So wrote my undergraduate thesis about Bitcoin, and so kind of fell down the proverbial rabbit hole then. And then I worked at Square for a few years after graduation, and then I worked in an Ethereum project called 0x, which is one of the first decentralized exchanges. And then right around when Solana went to mainnet, I joined Solana Labs as their head of growth. And then, as you mentioned, worked with you for several years there and at the Solana Foundation. The initiative I probably most focused on during my time at the Solana Foundation has been our online hackathon. So happy to jump into it.
Yeah. And before we talk to the other guests, I think it's sort of like important to just for me to point out, or maybe not even important, I just want to point it out just because, is that like when I first joined, I was screaming about developers and you're screaming about founders. And it took me like probably 1.5 years to start to realize that like you need both. And like these hackathons I saw as just like a lot of people I feel like do are just hackathons, and that's not what they are. They're sort of something in disguise. But anyways, it took me a while to understand truly what you were building during that time. So now I finally see, and here we are today. So how about you, Clay? Like you're co-founders with Nate and Matty here. Like what's your background and what are you up to?
Yeah, thanks, Chase. My background's not too dissimilar to Matty's, and it'll become apparent as to why. But started my career about a decade ago at Square, working on the core payments products team for about 4.5 years. Saw the company grow massively through sort of late stage through IPO, which was incredibly cool to see, and learned a lot early on in my career. I think one of the interesting things about working at Square is that there are a ton of folks there that were early on and excited about Bitcoin and sort of the counterbalance that it provided to traditional payment systems. We were working on sort of the early heydays of what was known as fintech, right, where we were putting nice coats of paint on really crummy legacy infrastructure, and so there's obviously a lot of interest there. But then as general purpose smart contract blockchains launched, most notably Ethereum, in 2015, 2016, decided to leave and join a company called 0x Labs, where we were building decentralized exchange infrastructure in the Ethereum ecosystem. And I guess all the while throughout my career, I've been excited about investing. And so I was a scout for Excel Partners, the global multi-stage venture fund, and also started an angel operator collective called Free Company Ventures, where about a dozen of us were investing on the same cap tables as a group, just helping founders from the earliest stages. So built a nice PA through that. And then eventually, as I wanted to dive more into sort of the investing world, decided to leave and join a small venture fund called Slow Ventures that is a generalist seed fund based in San Francisco. They have a long-standing practice around crypto, most notably we're seed investors in Solana. So that was sort of my primary entry point into the ecosystem, and spent a lot of time within the hackathons and judging, and got to know sort of how fundamentally different and incredible the developer ecosystem is in Solana. And so, obviously that is a natural extension to what we're building now today with Coliseum.
Sweet. Nate, how about you, man? Like, what's your background? You're the one guy who understands technology on that side.
I'll take it. Yeah, thanks, Chase. So my background is somewhat as a traditional software developer. I mean, I went to school for computer science. I've always been interested in computers. I found a love for programming in high school, and was also in school just really interested in the intersection of technology and finance. And so as I was kind of deciding which path to go down, decided that I would go kind of first into the software realm. So I moved to San Francisco and joined a startup that was doing essentially building lending products for people who couldn't really get access to good financial services. They had low credit scores and needed to kind of be taught how to improve their credit scores and how to use financial products. And so that gave me a taste of sort of building financial consumer products and also financial infrastructure. And I wanted to continue down that route. So I left and joined Stripe, where I was for about 4 years. I worked on a number of different things there. Really, most of my time was spent on the API infrastructure, which is kind of the core business. But all along, I was following along with what was happening in crypto and started to get nerd sniped into what was going on there, the interesting evolutions of that technology, and obviously the froth in the market as well. And so I saw an opportunity at Stripe as they launched a crypto engineering team to actually do that professionally full time, even though I've been spending a lot of my personal time and resources just dabbling. And so I joined the crypto engineering team there. And so I worked a bit on the crypto on-ramp product that they have, a little bit on crypto payouts. And that was really cool. But, crypto is a pretty small part of what Stripe does. And I was itching to go a little bit deeper, do something maybe a bit more crypto native. And that's kind of where this idea for Coliseum came along. Matty obviously had this idea, approached me, and we talked it over. And I was really, really interested in what Solana was doing. Once I started to understand how different and innovative it was, it's at the time especially was so much more, it was very much ahead of its time in terms of scalable blockchain architectures. And so that got me excited, and I started to learn about the way the developer ecosystem there was growing. And so that was enough to convince me to jump ship and leave Stripe and to do this full time.
Yeah, cool. So on that same note, like, I want to hear maybe from Matty, like, how you guys all sort of like know each other and met, like just briefly in general, and then how you convinced these guys to come and join you guys on this pretty large venture, I would say.
Yeah. So I guess again for me it starts in college. So Nate was someone that I knew from freshman year of college. So he lived down the dorm hallway from me, and so we got to know each other pretty early on. And we were friends for throughout college, and when I was writing my undergraduate thesis, he was right across from me in the library, basically writing his own. And I would always be throwing, crazy ideas about what I was learning about, in Bitcoin talk, basically, which is where kind of the epicenter of crypto information was at the time. And so we talked a lot about crypto then, and I was always kind of whispering in his ear how he should be, getting more involved in a full-time capacity. So that's how Nate and I know each other. And then Clay, so we both started on the same team on the same day at Square after graduating from college. So I met him there, and then kind of had a similar experience where while we were working on, payments like products for Square, during lunches, we were just talking about crypto basically. And yeah, obviously, as Ethereum kind of came into its own in 2016 and 2017, that's kind of when we both kind of made the decision to jump ship there and work in the industry full time. And so, yeah, we worked together at 0x for several years as well in the Ethereum space. And I think that's where we also sort of understood maybe some of the issues that were going on in the EVM space generally. And we started looking at other architectures pretty seriously. And so, that's how we all know each other. And I think Clay and Nate actually met at my wedding, I believe, several years ago.
True.
So,
Yeah.
but yeah, we've all known each other now for a few years. So, yeah.
Well, how did you convince these guys to join this crazy venture of yours?
That's a good question for them. I think maybe I pitched them on, maybe adventure is one way to put it. I mean, Clay was working at a VC fund, and Nate was working at Stripe, and I think we all have the entrepreneurial spirit in us, and I knew that. And these two were guys that could do things that I couldn't do. So Clay, obviously on the fund and VC side and fund operations, and then obviously Nate on the technical side of actually building out the product that we needed to in terms of like running these hackathons and the Accelerator program and the whole team matching portal that we built out. And so, I think we just all had very complementary skills, and I tried to, pitch them on it, and I'm really happy that they decided to jump on board early on.
Yeah, I think for me, like I was looking for an excuse to dive deeper into crypto, like I mentioned. And when Matty approached me with the idea, it was kind of this novel venture capital model, and I wasn't really sure if I wanted to do venture capital. In fact, I pretty much wasn't interested in doing a pure venture capital sort of role. But what really hooked me was that this model is so unique and is very native to builders and the developer ecosystem. And I saw a huge opportunity with what Matty described to continue building as an engineer while also taking on other roles on the investing and business side. And so because there was that opportunity to continue building something that I really hadn't seen anywhere else, I was pretty excited to join and do this. And so kind of offered a little bit of both worlds, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, for me on what convinced me, there's a bunch of things that led into it. One, some version of this is what I've always wanted to do in building something with some of my favorite people in the world. But I think big picture, when you look at the venture ecosystem broadly in crypto, there's not a lot of there's not many examples that you can point to where you say, oh, this is a really novel model that folks are implementing in terms of the angle of approach for building a venture capital fund in the space. And what that kind of trends towards is sort of very generalist groupthink in terms of the types of companies and deals that get underwritten. And it really just kind of reinforces the biases that that occur around, mainly just underwriting folks that come from the central casting, blue checkmark collecting Silicon Valley archetype, right? That then go on and build companies, and I think completely misses the mark in terms of tapping into this global well of talent that exists everywhere. There's an internet connection, which is pretty much the entire world at this point. And so that was one thing that was, extremely compelling as Matty about a year and a half ago came into the SLO office and was like, hey, I'm going to spin out this hackathon operation, and I think adding a fund to it would be really interesting, because the teams that are coming out of here are just so talented, and folks are completely missing the capacity for building, industry-defining products through this entry point. And then I think the second thing too, and this is more on the personal side, is like in the world of tech and investing, usually you have to kind of choose between two different modes of operating. One is being an operator and working at a company and you're focused on one product day to day. The other is investing, where you're more like a coach rather than a player. And so you have, a lot of diversity in terms of the problems and products that you're looking at day to day, but you have very little agency in the outcomes. And so, what I've convinced myself of, and this is certainly personal, is like, I get to do both with building Coliseum. We have, these hackathons and the platform that Nate's working on day to day, that we're really treating as a product, which no one else is doing in the ecosystem. And then you still have the diversity of founders and products at the earliest stages that, is when I like to work with folks the most. And so it's sort of getting to have your cake and eat it too in one opportunity here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Like, speaking of like the sort of platform, I convinced during the days of Solana Foundation, Matty, one time to leverage DevPost. I had to fight tooth and nail to make that happen. DevPost does have a really cool platform, but they fall short on a lot of the crypto required stuff. So to see you guys starting to build this out as a product itself, I think is going to be incredible. So with all that said, I want to talk to you guys and understand, like, and starting with you, Matty, like, what is Coliseum? I've referred to it as the YC of crypto, and a lot of people get a little pissed off about that because they don't agree. But so what is Coliseum?
Yeah, so Coliseum is an organization that's composed of 3 integrated pillars. The first is online hackathons. These are the bread and butter of how we've been scalably growing the developer and founder ecosystem on Solana. We're going to be continuing administering those competitions through a new platform that has a lot of features built out for pre-hackathon support. So that's like team matching, and finding an idea or pressure testing an idea that you already have. So by the time that you go compete in the hackathons on the platform, you're ready to go with a team and an idea. The second pillar is an accelerator. So this is specifically designed for top founders who are winners in the hackathon, who we will basically be inviting into this exclusive program, also centrally run on this new web application that we've built, where teams will have the opportunity to receive mentorship, pre-seed funding from Coliseum, and basically giving people enough time and advice to get them embedded in the ecosystem and go from basically DevNet to mainnet, where they can pitch seed investors through our demo day. And then that obviously leads to the third component, which I mentioned, which is a venture fund. We're going to be investing $250,000 in each team that it gets accepted into our accelerator post hackathon.
Okay, so what would be the main differentiator? And I've heard you already say this, and I know the answer, but for the audience, like the differentiator between this and like in the YC model, and it's like it had to do with the application process versus how you guys look at it.
So accelerators today, fundamentally, they basically run a college admissions like program where they require teams to basically fill out this written application, and then they go through a review cycle and then choose who to accept. Our model is very different, both on how we attract people to Coliseum and also how we evaluate talent. And that is through the online hackathon. So the hackathon basically allows us to observe teams over the course of 5 to 6 weeks, see how they sprint on the engineering side, see how they work together as a team, and then ultimately pitch their vision of the product that they're trying to build long term by the end of the hackathon. And so all of that data kind of gives us a very holistic look and an early look at how a high functioning team could perform in a very competitive environment. Our hackathons are the largest in the world. They're the most competitive. And so it attracts this very interesting group of usually technically minded teams who are building products in crypto. And so that gives us, I think, a much better look and understanding of who to support financially and also through our accelerator program.
Yeah, that's cool. I think that's like a really good, like, obviously I'm biased here because like I think these are going to be super important for us, but I'd love to hear like from Clay's perspective and Nate's perspective, like what is Coliseum to you?
Yeah, so Coliseum is the on-ramp for any developer anywhere in the world with an internet connection to build their company in crypto. I think that is instantiated in 3 key components. The first of which is the hackathons, which will run 3 times a year and have tens of thousands of developers globally building and competing for entry into our accelerator. And I think an important component of the hackathon platform is that not only will it enable teams that are looking to start a company in earnest, build and have a consistent entry point to do that, but importantly too, for any emerging chain like Solana, the lifeblood of that developer ecosystem is the continued growth of new developers and independent developers coming in. And so with this platform, I think we're really enabling two key components. One is the long tail independent developers that are just experimenting for the first time, and then the cohort of folks that are more oriented to becoming founders and want to create the industry defining companies on chain through this experimentation. And we think this is a great filtration mechanism for talent, because in order to even gain entry into the accelerator, you have to go win one of these hackathons. So that indexes towards a founder profile and a team profile that's extremely technical, that by default is extremely competitive, and I think importantly is willing to go and put their product idea up against thousands of others globally to see if it really has legs in terms of becoming a viable business long term. So the second component of Coliseum is the accelerator, which, if you think about the 3 key components, the platform, the accelerator, and the fund, it's really built to connect, enable, and fund folks that are building the next big thing on chain. And so upon winning one of these hackathons, which you are required to be incredibly technical and incredibly competitive to actually have a chance at winning, you're admitted to the accelerator, where we provide a holistic set of resources, from technical guidance to distribution and go-to-market guidance, and then obviously fundraising guidance before going off and building your product in earnest in the ecosystem. And so for us, spending that 6 weeks in the accelerator is extremely valuable in, one, you get a little bit of capital to de-risk the business and help folks take a flyer on building things full time. 2 is just time to gestate, right? You may build something over 6 weeks and really like the idea, but then you spend another 6 weeks and you're like, we need to refine it a little bit further. And so we provide a really open set of guardrails to allow for that continued evolution of the product. Because once you go out and raise, a proper round of financing from the venture ecosystem, that kind of sets the rudder on the direction for the product. And so for us, we think it's an important component to help founders really, decide which direction they want to take before going and launching in earnest. And then the accelerator itself culminates in a demo day where we're going to bring hundreds of investors from across the world that are interested in underwriting teams that are coming out of these hackathons, because as history has shown, they're an incredible crucible of innovation in the Solana ecosystem. And so we think we're a fantastic facilitator for access to that group of investors who look to us to be sort of the curator for that global talent. And so end to end, we think that, relative to accelerators and traditional funds, in the ecosystem, we really provide, a service first to the developer community that allows for, a consistent set of opportunities to run an engineering sprint and, work through the idea maze, and then the supporting infrastructure from the earliest stage to get the company off the ground and growing in earnest. So it's super exciting.
Yeah, I think like one of the more exciting points for me is like we've done a really good job with developers. We've done a really good job at getting people into these hackathons, but like the after portion of that, just this is not a knock on anybody, but crypto accelerators are very EVM focused. So Solana projects had a very, very hard time. Very few teams have made it in and very few teams have been successful. I do believe that Tensor had gone through another one, but like being able to sort of like Solana Foundation, like working closely alongside Coliseum, you sort of are able to put that entire funnel together without having to rely on some other biased third party that's like not really interested in Solana projects. So like that's the part that excites me, being able to have a little more control, like not Foundation having control, but I mean like a little more control of being able to help accelerate these teams and giving them what they need versus a bunch of fragmented pieces that may or may not work together. And now it's sort of like all being glued together.
I'd also say that like one benefit of, Coliseum being focused exclusively on Solana is that like the accelerator experience itself is going to be much more rich for a Solana founder. When you look at other accelerators and they are across multiple different chains, every ecosystem has different intricacies of how to get embedded in those ecosystems, how to build in those ecosystems, and ultimately how to succeed in those ecosystems. And so the fact that we are specifically focused on Solana and bringing teams into that ecosystem and helping them succeed, I think will show in our accelerator experience as well.
Yeah, I was going to say too, like getting back to the question around what hooked me into coming and building this full time. One of the points around why this is the right product for the right moment is, the data point around, yes, there's been a bunch of venture funding that has flowed into teams that have their genesis in hackathons, but there's been a huge, almost like valley of death from finishing a hackathon and completing a project to actually getting that funding. Matty would cite to me that it would take teams sometimes 6 to 9 months to actually raise a proper round of financing before after the hackathon, before they were able to actually pay themselves and quit their full-time jobs and everything in between. And so for us, if we can be there with the earliest capital possible, that helps more teams say yes to building full-time, especially if their idea has a ton of merit, but as a function of winning one of these hackathons, I think that we're only going to see more and more folks taking a flyer on joining and building in earnest.
So let's move on to the next question, and I'll let you guys feed us with your answers. So why is this so important for the Solana ecosystem?
So I would say if you look at historically at crypto, it's obviously very cyclical in prices, but also developer adoption, right? Whenever there's a bull market, you see a huge influx of new developers and founders into the ecosystem. And then when the markets crash, we go into a bear market, there's less there's just less developers coming in, and there's churn. And you can see that in things like the Electric Capital Developer Report each year. And so we fundamentally believe that there needs to be some growth mechanism, some growth machine that just repeatably and scalably brings in high quality developers and founders into crypto, so that experimentation and innovation just can continue on no matter the macroeconomic conditions, so that we're bringing ultimately more users on chain and more markets on chain. And so what is that mechanism? What is going to scalably and repeatably do that for the ecosystem? Well, I think we've seen over the last couple of years, especially during the bear market, that the Solana hackathons, the way that we've been running them, have accomplished that. And so we feel that Coliseum can be that entry point, that machine that's just constantly generating really, really high quality teams that are building really impactful products in the ecosystem. And so that's why it's so important, I think, generally for crypto to have something like Coliseum.
Yeah, I think one thing I notice, and like in this app, you see it a lot in other ecosystems, and I think it's like, personally, I think it's bad where they're just writing checks to projects to build on chain. Like that is a horrible incentive mechanism. Like with Solana hackathons, like you have to be motivated knowing that you might make $0. So that naturally brings in the right group of people that are like, I don't care if I win. I have a really, really fucking good idea, and I'm going to bring that to Solana, whether I win or not, opposed to just like, let's give a check to everybody that wants to build on Solana. They take the check, they do the thing, and then they move on to maybe the next chain for another grant or whatever it might be. So I think like this attracts the right type of person. And now with the Accelerator and the venture fund, there's a greater carrot. And I think this is my theory on this is that it's going to increase the level of competition once more people become aware of what Coliseum is. And I've been on LinkedIn, which I really hate it, but I've been doing that just to hope that some guy in Web 2 that's really smart on product and has a vision can make their way to the Coliseum platform, find a team of developers, and build something. And I really do hate LinkedIn. It's the bane of my existence, but I'm doing it to make sure that people find this growth engine you guys are talking about.
You're doing God's work.
Thanks for your sacrifice.
Clay, do you have something to say, man?
Yeah, I was going to say, I mean, you kind of alluded to it, but I think one of the important components of what we're doing is, continuing to grow the top of the funnel for folks that are willing to take a flyer on building on chain for the first time. And I think one of the important components, if you look historically at sort of how crypto has progressed and what's gotten funded and what's gotten built is, I kind of think of it in three eras, right? The first era being sort of the immaculate conception of Bitcoin and the invention of internet money, right? Which sort of opened the world's eyes to what a blockchain is and what could be created there. The second era is sort of make the infrastructure work, right? We had general purpose smart contracts launch like Ethereum and then obviously later Solana, that allowed for new products to be created in a more expressive environment, right? But there was still, a bit of volatility in terms of the performance of those underlying pieces of infrastructure. So we had to get them to a point where they could work. Now that, there is a relative stability in that underlying infrastructure, I think it's now making that infrastructure useful, which means taking it and distributing it to as many people globally as possible, both from a developer perspective and an end user perspective. And so for us, Solana and growing that developer ecosystem gives blockchains like Solana the most or the best shot at actually driving that distribution, where if we can convince more folks globally that view crypto and blockchains as just another piece of infrastructure that helps a product go, we stand a really great chance of enabling, the tens of millions or hundreds of millions of prospective users out there to actually have an entry point in earnest. Because I think the long history of crypto, at least to date, has largely been defined by folks building crypto for crypto's sake, which obviously is necessary to progress the underlying, L1s and their complementary pieces of infrastructure, but in and of itself won't drive meaningful acquisition of users globally. And so for us, that's one of the key components of what we think we're enabling here.
So the next question I want to talk to you guys about is like, we now understand what Coliseum is, what you guys are like, the three components, what the short-term impact is, and like, but I wanna understand what you guys view as sort of like the long-term vision. Obviously, like right now, it's like there's these three components, these three prongs, but like, what does this look like into the, like, let's say 3 years into the future? Like, how does it get better than what it is? Like, let's say within this year, you guys run some a couple hackathons, they're successful, but like, what's the next sort of like milestone to make this even better than it's going to be already?
Yeah, so I think looking into the future, obviously, we need more high quality startups in the ecosystem and therefore high quality founders. And as Coliseum's portfolio and companies grow over time, the bench of alumni and the mentor network that we've started will grow in lockstep. And that's really what founders from like Web2 or TradFi or academia are looking for. They look for examples of really high growth startups and really high performing founders. And so if we can grow a stable of, really, really impactful, community members that have been founders that have gone through that whole process of launching, through the hackathon, raising money, scaling their business on Solana, that is going to just feed right back into the next batch of founders. And so we think that there's like already an important flywheel spinning with, current mentors that we have that are previous hackathon winners. So that's going to be pretty exciting to be built out. And then, I guess I'll pause there.
Yeah, I think my answer to it around the next few years is, I think, one, establishing the Coliseum brand as the primary entry point for anyone wanting to develop and refine their idea in earnest on chain, right? And so how we do that is, to Matty's point, just continue to create that flywheel effect that enables more founders to come in, work through the idea maze, drive distribution, get funding to de-risk the business, and then obviously get the mentorship and guidance to refine the idea such that it can be an enduring company over the next decade or so. Maybe a second point that I would love to see, just because I spend way too much time on Twitter, is to see, to try to forge a way for the real conversations and the real product ideation and refinement to occur on the Coliseum platform as opposed to, on crypto Twitter. Because I think that what we've created with this platform in terms of facilitating connections, putting together a cohesive team, really will thrive in that environment on the Coliseum platform. And so, what was previously Bitcoin Talk that then became, Reddit threads that then became crypto Twitter, hopefully becomes Coliseum in the future, at least as it relates to product creation. I think like the thought leadership and, random sniping and fights and religious battles, those can occur and they can have their place on crypto Twitter, but I would love to see sort of product ideation and legitimate discussion and connection actually occur on the Coliseum platform.
Yeah, I was going to say that's probably a perfect segue to pull in Nate and talking about like the future of the product, because I've pinged Matty 100 times privately being like, this needs to be like during the old hackathons, it's like you sign up on a type form, you have 0 connections, and then you submit a type form at the end and there's nothing in between really. So having a platform that you like come to every day because there's something there for you, whether it's discussion, whether it's like some updates, whether it is any of those things, like that platform becomes like part of my daily routine, is like during a hackathon is like, and even not during hackathons, maybe there's other elements, but I'm curious to hear like Nate's view of like the future vision of the platform itself.
There's so many directions we can go with this. Like, so the V0 really was just to get everything in place that was necessary to successfully run the hackathons and the Accelerator program as is. So essentially like replacing all the kind of piecemeal tools that Matty had experimented and that you had experimented with in the past for these hackathons, and replacing them with something custom built from the ground up for this, and just serving that need right on day one. And so we're almost to that point, which is just the V0. With this upcoming hackathon, we will be, I think, at that point where we have the platform to support the hackathons and kind of the most core needs around that. And then from there, I think like any early stage tech product, like really our roadmap will be determined by what we see working and the feedback that we get from the users. But that being said, like we do have a lot of ideas of where to go next. One of them is really leaning into the sort of educational and kind of like developer community side of things, and trying to turn this into like the go-to place for all developers on Solana to come whether they're brand new and just learning, they come in and they can get access to videos or like a very curated library of sort of Solana development resources. Or if they're further along and they kind of are pushing the boundaries of Solana development, they will have a very focused discussion board where they can talk about almost like research-esque things that are kind of more on the cutting edge, or just like novel applications that they want to work on. And they don't really have anywhere else to go to talk about that and have as curated a set of people to bounce ideas off of. I mean, I think the core thing here is basically, you know, in the previous world, the hackathons would have these discords where there would be discussions, but those were just narrowly focused on the hackathons, and they were
filled with bots and spam
and filled with bots and pretty ephemeral. And like, so the Discord would disappear and then you'd lose all that context. And so I think a really important thing about the platform is that it is sticky. It's like, it's going to be there forever effectively. And so we have this ability to now build up a ton of context, whether that's like written resources that we provide or curate, or just conversation and discussion histories from people who are extremely knowledgeable and excited about this. So yeah, I think that's one direction. The other piece is more on the internal side, which like some of which we probably can't talk about too much, but this is just like making the accelerator and founder experiences as good as possible. I think YC is really like the gold standard here. You know, you hear people talk about Bookface, which is their internal platform, which is they keep very private. We're doing something somewhat similar, but evolving that in certain ways. So essentially, we want our kind of accelerator cohorts and our founder alumni to have access to the best resources, an even further curated group of folks that they can discuss with internally, to have access to all the knowledge, without giving too much away, to have access to all the knowledge that they need to be successful in growing a startup. And so that is like kind of the thing that we hope will keep the accelerator side of things growing, while the kind of mouth of the funnel with the hackathons grows its own sort of community of developers around that.
Yeah, I think thinking about Coliseum going into the future and where it evolves, definitely on the product side, is one really, really powerful thing is this sort of the co-founder matching portal. Right now, it's pretty basic. You know, everyone who is looking for a co-founder, they agree to that. They have a profile that has like very basic information about what they're looking for and the types of people that they want to match with, and then they can filter that search by location and skill type and all that. But I think in the future, like, one of the powerful things we see in the hackathon is like people actually find their co-founders in these events. There's been many examples of top teams who've come through the hackathon that they've met their co-founder through the channels around it. And so if we can really take the co-founder matching portal and really evolve it to where it becomes a very, very, very effective at connecting specific founder personalities together to go build a product, that is going to be a huge deal, because there's so many individuals, you know, around the world that are super into crypto. Maybe they're even really technical, but they don't have anyone that lives near them, or maybe their friends really aren't really into crypto. And so if they can meet a like-minded person that matches very well with them in terms of a co-founder relationship through our platform, that is going to explode the number of quality startups in the ecosystem. And so that's a huge part of the platform that we're working on in the future.
One thing that's also come to mind, just I guess in the impact that we can have on fundraising and venture capital in crypto, is that, you know, it's taken a long time over the history of technology for new models to actually emerge that then become consensus for, you know, generalist tech VCs to actually underwrite. And so I think one of the roles that we can play is help with enabling the experimentation over and over and over such that the world starts to coalesce around, hey, if you're building a business in crypto, whether it's application layer, infrastructure, or protocol, here are the different sort of models that folks can reason about in terms of how to assign value to that. I think today we're still very much in the like speculative and experimentation phase of, for a protocol, right, if you're launching a token and you're thinking about enabling a fee switch, like what does that mean from what the actual value of that protocol is? I think the same thing too with applications and, you know, the relative defensibility of those. And so, you know, in order for crypto and founders in the Solana ecosystem and more broadly to have the opportunity to continue to raise, you know, future rounds of capital down the line, especially if they're building an equity-based business, I think we need more experimentation as to what that sort of consensus model, business model is based on the different tracks that you're building towards. Because otherwise, you know, it becomes something that's really easy to get to like version 1, but then to actually get the capital to expand it becomes a little bit more difficult. Now, you know, there is a version of the world where it's like, actually that doesn't matter and you don't need the traditional venture capital supply chain to make this go because, you know, blockchains make teams so much more capital efficient and you can do so much more with just a few folks and a few lines of code. But I do think that that's an important role that we're going to play in sort of defining the future of the industry.
Yeah, fully agree. And I'm like super, again, I'll say it again, I'm just like super excited to like just see where Coliseum takes the Solana ecosystem, because like having a growth machine like this that's structured, that has a clear path for founders to navigate through versus sort of like the early days of like, okay, I won a hackathon, now what? Like that was really what would happen. The only ones who actually made it, the ones that you guys like are aware of, that Matty's aware of, are just guys that just already had that founder drive. But there could have been some ones that might have had it if they had a little more of a clear path, guidance, funding, accelerator. So there could have been some missed, but like we just won't miss them anymore, I guess. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining the show. And this is super exciting to hear everything that's been going on, what your guys' plans are. So I will see you guys later and catch everybody watching next time. Cheers.
All right. Thanks, Chase.
Thanks, Chase.